Imagine this, a peaceful morning, the kind where the sun just begins to paint the sky with hues of gold and pink. But beneath this serene canvas, a storm brews that will soon shatter lives. Today, Sarah, with her heart full of trust and eyes clear with love, waves goodbye to her husband Mark as he embarks on what she believes is his annual hunting trip. But oh, if only she knew this was the beginning of an unraveling that would lead to a dramatic, public downfall for Mark. The air is crisp, carrying whispers of autumn, yet there's an unsettling chill that Sarah can't shake off, one that feels like an omen of the betrayal to come. Sarah stands in the doorway of their quaint, two-story home, the one they've painted and loved into existence. The early morning light casts long shadows across the porch, merging with the steam from her coffee cup, creating an almost ethereal fog around her. Mark, in his rugged hunting gear, looks every part the outdoorsman, his smile easy, his goodbye casual. "See you in a week, love," he says, his voice carrying the confidence of a man with nothing to hide, or so it seems. The sound of his truck starting up cuts through the morning quiet, its engine a familiar rumble that usually brings comfort, but today, for reasons unknown to her, stirs unease in Sarah's chest. She watches as the truck disappears down the dirt road, leaving behind a trail of dust that lingers like a question mark in the air. The house feels larger, emptier without him, each room echoing with the ghosts of their shared laughter and whispered secrets. Sarah moves back inside, the warmth of the kitchen contrasting starkly with the cold knot forming in her stomach. She busies herself with mundane tasks, yet her thoughts keep drifting to the hunting trip. The atmosphere is one of deceptive calm. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the soft hum of the refrigerator, all seem to underscore the silence that's about to be broken. She notices for the first time how Mark had seemed almost too eager to leave, his preparations too meticulous. As she sips her coffee, now lukewarm, Sarah's eyes catch on a photo of them on their wedding day, both beaming with promises in their eyes. A pang of doubt, unbidden, makes her heart skip. She shakes her head, dismissing it as mere loneliness or perhaps the remnants of a dream she can't recall. But there, in the back of her mind, a seed of suspicion begins to sprout. She recalls the slight hesitation in Mark's eyes when he mentioned this trip, the way he dodged questions about his hunting buddies this time. The house, which should be a sanctuary, feels like a stage set for a drama yet to unfold. The walls, adorned with pictures of their life together, now seem to hold secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Sarah decides to keep herself busy, but the quiet of the house only amplifies her growing unease, setting the scene for the layers of deceit she's yet to uncover. This morning, which began with the promise of routine, has unknowingly begun the countdown to a revelation that will change everything. The peace of a solitary morning had left Sarah in a state of quietude, but now, as the day stretched on, that peace was corroding into something more sinister. The house, once a symbol of their shared life, now seemed like a labyrinth of hidden truths. Each tick of the clock was like a heartbeat, echoing her growing suspicion, her hurt, and her fear. Sarah, now alone with her thoughts, felt the weight of loneliness more acutely. She wandered through the rooms, each one a gallery of memories. But today, those memories felt tainted. Each photo, each trinket from their travels, now seemed to mock her with questions she hadn't dared to ask before. She sat at the kitchen table, the same place where they shared countless meals, where Mark had promised forever. But now the silence was oppressive, and with every passing minute, her mind played a relentless game of what if. What if this trip wasn't just about hunting? What if the man she loved was not who she thought he was? Her fingers, trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity, sought out the jacket Mark had left behind in his haste. It was his favorite, one he wore to all his hunting trips, its scent still carrying his cologne. As she reached into the pocket, she found a receipt, not for hunting gear or bait, but from an upscale restaurant, one they'd talked about visiting together but never did. Her heart skipped, then raced. The receipt was dated for last night, and it wasn't just for a meal. It included a bottle of expensive wine. Confusion morphed into a sharp pang of betrayal. Why would Mark be at such a place during his hunting trip? She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a business meeting, or perhaps he'd taken his friends there as a treat, but the location of the restaurant was miles away from where he claimed to be hunting. The more she thought, the more the pieces didn't fit. Sarah's emotions were a tumultuous sea. Waves of denial crashed against tides of suspicion. She felt a fool, her love for Mark blinding her to what now seemed so obvious. Anger bubbled beneath her sadness. How could he treat their life together, their vows, with such disregard? She moved to her laptop, her fingers typing furiously, searching for any mention of Mark online from the previous night. Nothing. The silence from the digital world was deafening, amplifying her solitude and her doubts. She recalled past trips, the times he came back with stories of the hunt, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. But now those tales felt rehearsed, like lines from a script he'd memorized too well. The day turned into evening, and with it, Sarah's mind became a theater of scenarios, each more damning than the last. She imagined Mark with someone else, laughing over that wine, sharing the intimacy that should have been hers. The thought was a physical pain, a knot in her stomach that wouldn't ease. Her resolve hardened. She couldn't let this suspicion fester without answers. She decided she would confront him, but first she needed more than just a receipt to accuse. The betrayal she felt was not just in the act, but in the years of trust she had given, now feeling like it was built on sand. As night fell, the house was dark, mirroring the shadows now cast over her heart. Sarah's world, once so clear, was now a puzzle missing too many pieces, and she was determined to find them, no matter the cost to her peace of mind. The night promised little sleep, but perhaps, she thought, it would bring clarity to her clouded heart. The forest had always been Mark's escape, a place where he could be anyone or no one, where the echoing calls of nature drowned out the whispers of his deceit. But today, as he sat in his hunting blind, the calm he usually found was replaced by an undercurrent of panic. The woods, once his sanctuary, now felt like the walls of a closing trap. Mark wasn't hunting, he was hiding. His mind was not on the deer or the silence of the woods, but on the life he was meticulously unraveling back home. Each snap of a twig, each distant rustle, made his heart jump, not with the thrill of the hunt, but with the fear of discovery. His phone, silenced but ever present, lay beside him, a constant reminder of the double life he led. The screen, when it lit up, showed messages not from Sarah, but from another woman, one whose affection he'd sought for the thrill, the validation. But now every notification felt like an alarm, signaling an end to his charade. He thought of Sarah back home, her trusting eyes, her love so pure it had once made him feel worthy. Guilt gnawed at him, a slow, relentless bite. He'd told himself these trips were harmless, just a way to feel alive again, to escape the mundane. But the reality was, he was escaping her, their life together, and now he was trapped by his own lies. The day had started with the usual excitement, the thrill of freedom, but as hours passed, Mark's joy turned to dread. He hadn't accounted for the receipt, a foolish mistake. His mind replayed the moment he left it in his jacket, a careless oversight in his carefully constructed narrative. He imagined Sarah's face, the confusion turning into suspicion, then betrayal. He knew her too well. She was meticulous, curious, and once she started questioning, she wouldn't stop until she had answers. The thought of her piecing together his lies made him feel sick, a physical manifestation of his guilt. His phone buzzed again, another message from his mistress. Instead of the usual rush, it brought him no pleasure, only a stark reminder of his betrayal. He was caught between two worlds, one of love and commitment, the other of deceit and temporary exhilaration. Mark tried to focus on the hunt, to lose himself in the act of tracking, but his mind was elsewhere. He imagined Sarah calling his hunting buddies, finding out he wasn't with them. The scenario played out in his head like a horror movie, each scene more damning than the last. As evening approached, the forest darkened, mirroring the shadow over his conscience. He felt the weight of his actions, not just the lies, but the manipulation, the gaslighting. He had twisted truths, made Sarah doubt her instincts, all to protect this version of himself that he now despised. Fear turned into a cold sweat. What if Sarah decided to surprise him here? What if she confronted him with evidence? His heart raced, not with the adrenaline of the hunt, but with the terror of exposure. He knew he had to end this affair, but the thought of facing Sarah, of seeing the hurt in her eyes, was paralyzing. He was a man caught in his own web, and with each passing moment, the threads tightened, ensnaring him further in a life of his own making. As he packed up to leave, not with the satisfaction of a successful hunt, but with the dread of returning home, Mark realized his life had become a game he no longer wanted to play. But the game was far from over. It was just entering its most dangerous phase. The drive back to Sarah was long, each mile stretching Mark's nerves thinner. The cabin he left behind felt like a sanctuary from the storm brewing at home, but he knew it was time to face the tempest he'd created. The closer he got, the heavier his heart, his lies now a palpable burden. Sarah, meanwhile, had transformed her grief into a quiet, seething resolve. She had spent the day arming herself with more than just suspicion. She'd contacted Mark's hunting buddies, learning he hadn't been with them at all. Her heart was a battleground of love and rage, both fighting for dominance. As Mark walked through the door, his smile was forced, his greeting too rehearsed. "Caught a big one this time," he boasted, but his eyes didn't meet hers, a clear sign of evasion. Sarah's voice was calm, a deceptive serenity. "Did you? That's wonderful. I found your jacket, by the way. Forgot to pack it, huh?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp, watching for any flinch, any sign of guilt. Mark's laugh was hollow. "Yeah, completely slipped my mind. I was so excited about the hunt." "And the dinner at L'Etoile?" Sarah asked, her voice still soft but with an edge. His face paled, a micro-expression of panic before he recovered. "Oh, that was a last-minute thing with the guys. We decided to celebrate. Funny, they all said they hadn't seen you at all." "Not once," Sarah countered, her heart pounding, the calm exterior barely containing the storm within. Mark's mind raced, his lies now a tangled mess. "Well, we split up for a bit. You know how it is." The air was thick with tension, the truth hovering like a specter. Sarah, feeling the weight of betrayal, pushed further. "And was she there, Mark? At this dinner?" His hesitation was all the confirmation Sarah needed. Her heart ached, but her resolve was steel. "I've seen the pictures, Mark. The private investigator sent them to me. You weren't hunting. You were with her." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's facade crumbled, his guilt laid bare. His eyes, once so full of deceit, now reflected the panic of a man caught in his own trap. Sarah felt a mix of triumph and devastation. She had her proof, but the reality of it was a blade through her heart. This was not the end, but the beginning of the unraveling, the prelude to a confrontation that would shake their world to its core. The air in the house was charged, electric with the unsaid words that hung between Sarah and Mark. The atmosphere thick with betrayal and the anticipation of an explosion. The calm facade had shattered, leaving raw emotions exposed. Sarah stood, her posture rigid, an embodiment of the storm inside her. "Who is she, Mark? How long has this been going on?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the turmoil beneath. Mark, cornered, his usual charm useless, ran a hand through his hair, a sign of his unraveling. "Sarah, it's not what you think. It's just what? A mistake? A one-time thing? Because from these photos, it looks pretty ongoing." She shot back, her voice rising as she threw the pictures onto the table. They showed Mark, laughing, touching another woman, in settings far from any hunting ground. "It's complicated, Sarah. I didn't mean for it to get this far," Mark pleaded, his voice cracking under the weight of his guilt. "Complicated?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "You've been lying to me for how long? Using these hunting trips as your alibi? How many times have you looked me in the eye and lied?" Mark moved towards her, but she stepped back, her stance defensive. "I love you, Sarah. This, with her, it was just what, Mark? An escape? A thrill? While I was here, trusting you, believing in us." Her words were sharp, each one slicing through the air between them. He sighed, defeated. "I was feeling lost, like I wasn't enough. She made me feel alive again." Sarah's eyes welled with tears of anger and pain. And what about me, Mark? What about our life? Was I not enough to keep you alive? No, no, that's not it. I was just confused, lost in my own head, he tried to explain, but his words lacked conviction. Confused? You made a choice, Mark. Every time you went to her, you chose betrayal. You chose to lie to me, Sarah countered, her voice breaking. Did you ever think about how this would feel for me? To find out like this? Mark looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did. You hurt us, Mark. Our marriage, our trust, everything we built, she said, the weight of each word heavy with sorrow and anger. He tried again, desperation in his tone. Can we fix this? Can we move past this? Sarah looked at him, the man she thought she knew, now a stranger before her. How, Mark? How do we move past you creating a life separate from ours? How do we trust again when every memory is now tainted? Silence followed, heavy with the gravity of their situation. Mark's shoulders slumped, the fight gone out of him. I don't know. I don't want to lose you. You should have thought of that before, Sarah whispered, her voice a mix of resolve and heartbreak. I need time, Mark. Time to think, to decide if there's anything left to salvage from this wreckage. As Mark nodded, defeated, the tension in the room was palpable, each breath they took charged with the uncertainty of what would come next. The confrontation had only begun, the true battle for their future yet to unfold. The silence following their confrontation was a living entity, filling the house with an oppressive weight. Each passing second seemed to tighten the noose around their relationship, the air thick with unspoken accusations and regrets. Sarah had kept her distance, her mind a whirlwind of betrayal and strategy. She'd spent the past days piecing together more evidence, not just for her peace of mind, but for the confrontation she knew was inevitable. One evening, under the dim light of their living room, she laid out her discoveries on the coffee table. Bank statements, phone records, a burner phone Mark thought he'd hidden well. Look at this, Mark, she said, her voice cold, devoid of the warmth it once held. Mark, his face drawn, looked at the evidence, each piece a nail in his coffin. Sarah, please, we can talk about this, he began, but his voice lacked conviction. Talk? Like how you talk to her every night? Sarah pointed to the phone records. Or how you've been siphoning money into this account for what? Your little escapades. He sat down, the reality of his deceit laid bare. I was going to stop. I swear I was going to end it. When? Sarah's voice was sharp. After another trip? Another lie? You've made a fool out of me, Mark, in front of our friends, our family. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he repeated, a pitiful refrain. But it did, didn't it? And now here we are, she said, her eyes burning with unshed tears. You've woven such a tangled web, Mark. How do I even begin to trust you again? Mark looked at her, his own eyes reflecting a mix of fear and sorrow. I'll do anything, Sarah. Anything to make this right. Anything. She stood up, pacing, her anger fueling her movements. You can't unweave this web, Mark. It's too late for that. He reached out, but she recoiled. Don't, just don't, she said, her voice breaking. You've had your fun, your secrets. Now it's my turn. What do you mean? Mark's voice was suddenly cautious, sensing the storm about to break. I'm going to expose you, Mark, to everyone. I want them to see the real you, not the facade you've been living behind, she declared, her decision stealing her resolve. The tension in the room was almost tangible, the air charged with the impending fallout of their shared life coming undone. Mark, seeing the determination in her eyes, knew this was not just a threat, but a promise of retribution. The endgame was near, and it would be public, humiliating, and irreversible. The house that once echoed with laughter now bore the silence of a battlefield before the final charge. Sarah, with her heart encased in a fortress of resolve, was the architect of an endgame she had never imagined she would play. Mark, meanwhile, felt the walls closing in, each day a step closer to his exposure. Sarah had spent sleepless nights not just in grief, but in strategic planning. She knew the power of a public revelation, the shockwave it would send through their social circle. But this was more than vengeance. It was about reclaiming her narrative, her dignity. She began by contacting Mark's closest friends, those who had unknowingly facilitated his deceit with their alibis. "I need to talk to you all," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. They agreed, sensing something monumental was about to unfold. In the meantime, she prepared the venue, their annual family and friends gathering, this time at their home. "It's Mark's birthday," she had announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, inviting everyone for what they thought would be a celebration. Mark, caught in his own web, tried to salvage something. "Sarah, can we not do this? Can't we handle this privately?" he pleaded, the fear of public humiliation evident in his eyes. "It's too late for privacy, Mark. You made sure of that," she responded, her tone final. "You've lived in the shadows of lies. Now let's see how you handle the light of truth." She meticulously arranged the evidence, the photos, bank statements, everything, in a folder. She practiced her words, her reveal, ensuring each sentence would cut through the facade Mark had built. The night of the party arrived, the house filled with laughter and chatter, oblivious to the storm brewing. Mark, under the guise of the celebrant, mingled, his smile tight, his eyes darting to Sarah, who played the perfect hostess, her performance flawless. As the evening progressed, Sarah's tension was palpable, but so was her control. She waited, letting the joy peak, letting everyone be lulled into the normalcy of the celebration. Then, as the cake was about to be brought out, she stood up, her voice cutting through the room. "Before we celebrate, there's something everyone should know about Mark." The room quieted, all eyes on her, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Mark's face drained of color, his birthday turning into his day of reckoning. Sarah began, "For years, Mark has been living a double life. What you thought were hunting trips were actually—" She paused, letting the anticipation build, then handed the folder to Mark's best friend, saying, "Open this." As the friend opened it, gasps and murmurs spread. Pictures of Mark with another woman, financial discrepancies. The truth was now in plain sight. Mark tried to speak, but words failed him. Sarah continued, "I've been betrayed, and tonight we all see the truth. I wanted you all to know, to understand, because I deserve to be seen, not just as Mark's wife, but as someone who survived this deception." Her plan was in motion, the setup complete. The guests were shocked, some moved to comfort her, others looking at Mark with disbelief. Sarah felt a mix of pain and triumph. The plan was working, and soon she would have her closure, her moment of standing tall in her truth. The room, once a place of celebration, now bore the weight of the revealed truth, the air thick with shock and whispers. The tension had reached its peak, the silence before the storm now giving way to the thunder of revelation. Sarah stood, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the gaze of each friend, each family member. "Mark," she said, her voice clear, resonating with a strength born of betrayal, and now liberation. "I hope you understand, this isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming my life, my dignity." Mark, cornered by his own lies, looked around, seeing the trust he'd broken reflected in every face. "Sarah, please," he whispered, his voice a mix of desperation and defeat. "No," she cut him off. "You've had your time to speak, to lie. Now it's my turn." She turned to the crowd, her voice steady. "Mark has been cheating on me for years, using hunting trips as his alibi. Here's the proof." She gestured to the photos. The documents spread out, undeniable evidence of his deceit. The room was divided. Some looked at Mark with pity, others with disgust. His best friend, holding the folder, shook his head. "Man, how could you do this to Sarah?" Mark, his facade crumbling, stammered, I didn't want to hurt anyone. I was lost." "You were lost?" Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through his excuses. "And what about me? Was I your compass, your guide, only when it suited you?" The guests murmured, some offering support to Sarah, others questioning Mark directly. The atmosphere was charged, the once jovial party now a tribunal of judgment. Sarah continued, "I wanted this public because Mark thrives in secrecy. I wanted you all to see, to know, because this isn't just my burden to bear. It's a lesson in trust, in loyalty. Tears were in her eyes, but they were tears of resolve, of a new beginning. I'm not just ending this chapter with Mark, I'm starting a new one for myself. One where I'm not defined by his lies. Mark, seeing his life unravel, tried one last plea. Can we not talk about this privately? Fix this? Sarah shook her head. There's nothing left to fix, Mark. You've broken us beyond repair. But tonight, I'm fixing myself. The room was silent, the weight of her words settling in. Friends approached Sarah, offering hugs, words of support, their eyes filled with respect for her courage. As the party disbanded, the energy shifted from shock to solidarity around Sarah. Mark was left alone, his betrayals now public knowledge, his reputation in tatters. Outside, under the night sky, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of deceit lift off her. She looked at the stars, her future now hers to define. I did it for me, she whispered to herself, a smile breaking through the pain. I did it for my truth. In the aftermath, as the news spread through their community, Sarah found peace in her decision. The public exposure had been her catharsis, her way to ensure Mark would feel the full weight of his actions. She knew healing would take time, but tonight she had reclaimed her narrative, her dignity. The story of her betrayal would no longer define her. Instead, it would be a testament to her strength, her resilience. The end was just the beginning of her new chapter, one where she would thrive, not just survive.